Thanks for coming out, guys. We have about 10, 12 people in the room, about 20 or 25 plus online. I'm just going to give a brief kind of backstory on strategic planning for our company, and then a little bit about Chris, and then we'll invite Chris up to give a little talk. But many people know that strategic planning, the importance of it for companies. But for Lane Associates, it's been about the last 5 years, give or take, that we've started to do strategic planning for each department. And it's been relatively new. And as a practice, we're getting better and better each year. So each department has been working on strategic plans. And the process has been, we develop the plans leading into the new year. And first quarter, we present them to the officers, and then collectively we get feedback. So each department develop a plan and get feedback. And the officer's role is really to help orchestrate and focus and make sure that each department's strategic plans dovetail into larger mission and goals of the organization. So this has been a practice for the last 5 years as a firm. And I think it brings a lot of value. We're talking about goals, growth, kind of where we want to go, things we need to improve on. Some of the challenges with strategic plans is that we develop a plan and then it could sit on a shelf. And it could collect dust if there's no process in place to ship away and actually act on these things. And I know personally that's been a challenge for our department. We're so busy, we're chasing proposals, working with staff, meeting deadlines, that to accomplish, some of these big lofty goals is challenging. So I'm really excited to have Chris, our speaker here today, to help talk through the aspect of executing on strategic plans. It's one thing to have a plan and to go through planning, but it's the other aspect of it, which is actually executing and accomplishing these things. I stumbled on a great quote from a philosopher we all know, Yogi Berra. It says, if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up somewhere else. And that's all part of it. You don't know where you're going as a company, as a person, as a professional, you're going to end up somewhere else, and it might not be a good place. So, strategic planning dovetails into the vision and direction aspect. And what's great about Chris, and just having gotten to know him a little bit in the last few years, is that strategic planning, his passion is actually on the execution side. It's planning, but there is a thoughtful process to actually execute. So I'm excited to hear that from him. Quick introduction as far as background for Chris. You guys may have read the invite we sent out. Actually had a detailed little bio on Chris, but as far as an introduction goes, Chris hails from the tri-state area in Connecticut, attended West Point. He served 35 years active duty in the U.S. Army. He served as an infantryman, as an assistant professor of history at West Point, and the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. In the field of operational and strategic planning from the division level, which is 10,000 soldiers, all the way to the Pentagon. He served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He retired as a 2-star general. His last 2 jobs were Deputy Director for Joint Strategic Planning on the Joint Staff, that's for the military's Chief Strategy Officer, and Director for Strategy, Plans, and Policy for the U.S. Army, that's for the Army's COO. Chris is passionate about his calling to help leaders optimize execution. And he's been doing through this new venture, which is his LLC called Drive Forward. So this is really second career after 35 years of commitment in serving in the military. I love this little quote he had just to look up his resume. He finds great inspiration from a plaque from his bride, Linda, who's been married to for 35 years. And the plaque reads, "Behind every retired man is a woman who wishes her husband would go back to work." So here's Chris going back to work. He's here to share about strategic planning for execution, how to actually move these plans and ideas forward. I'm excited to have him. Chris, without further ado, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. I guess good afternoon. It's kind of been a fast day. So it's an honor to be here, really. I mean, to be asked to come and speak about strategic planning. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. And as Matt said, the execution of it. Been doing that really for about the last 15 years of my career, and working with organizations ever since I retired about 5 years ago. help them understand. And, any organization that wants to understand this space, it's just something that I feel uniquely gifted to help them do. And reviewing your website, I'm amazed at what this organization does. The beauty of the products, the buildings across the board is really phenomenal. And the magnitude of them is quite impressive. I'm like, and then reading through what you do with planning, I think the things that I'll talk about hopefully will resonate, certainly from an organizational perspective. I mean, obviously you can't create a massive structure the right way, boots on the ground when it comes down to the last details, without a good plan, right? So that's really what this is about. Harvard Business Review reports that a staggering 95% of employees do not understand or are unaware of their company's strategy. I think that statistic is completely reversible, by the way, but that is pretty amazing to me. That's where a lot of organizations actually stand with regard to this space of understanding strategy. I was working with one nonprofit, 35 people, super committed professionals, day in, day out. I'm looking at their mission statement. They know what the tasks are of their mission, but they don't know what the why is of what they do. There's no big why. Why do we do this as an organization? I was amazed. I thought they all understood it. They're such hard workers, so diligent. I gave them 35 3x5 cards. Everybody get a 3x5 card. Please just write down on there what your understanding of the purpose is, the why of what your organization does. Collect them up. 35 different answers to what the organization does. I was like, this organization is like a disco ball in its focus. I mean, this is the image that came to my mind. We've got this, I call it the disco ball of despair. It's He. It's twofold. It results in despair because you don't know really why you do what you do. It's because there's so much disparity in terms of the focus. So what we started doing is we started implementing some strategic planning processes, products, worked with a team, and helped integrate all these people into a focused beam, a productive output that's measurable. That's kind of what strategic planning is all about. It's integrating, right? I'm an integrator. That's what I do. I'm a strategic integrator. So in working in these plans, your website talks about multidisciplinary teams. Strategic planning really comes down to working with teams to solve problems. There are three things that I've learned over the years in terms of strategic planning, 15 years of this from really, the division level but planning from the platoon level to the Pentagon is almost the same thing in terms of three key things. You have to have a planner, which is, I'll talk more about this, a leader. You have to have a plan, super, right? And then you have to have a process to implement it. If you don't have those three things in a strong way, it's not going to be successful. If it fails, it's because of one of those three things, at least from what I've seen. Those are kind of the three common denominators of successful strategic planning. So I'm going to talk about this from the shape. Some people like to use different things, but I'm going to talk about the planner from a 3-meter cube space is what I call it. Three-legged stool. This is the plan. Has three key things that make it stable. And then the workout, the process. How do you make this actually happen? So in terms of a planner, why do I have a box for a planner? I call it 3 meters cube because everybody works in a 3-meter cube space. I'm in a plan shop at Central Command headquarters, and everybody's got a cubicle. I mean, that's what we live in. The right person in the right place doing the right thing can literally change the world. And there's so much with this in terms of talent management and getting the right person in the right seat doing the right thing. And to me, I love to work to get the right person in the right place because this is really about developing leaders. And some people say, well, the strategy is really about the CEO owns the strategy. Well, The CEO doesn't have time to really develop the strategy. I mean, like in terms, we as planners, someone as a planner is working a team to help the CEO understand the strategy that he wants or she wants to implement and execute. But it's really, so interestingly with the military, about 35 years ago, we started really investing in planners, like schools of planning. The School of Advanced Military Studies in the Army is called SAMS, the Jedi Knights. They're trained for a year in operational planning. All the services have planners. When you go to a headquarters, there is always the planner on any staff, wherever you go. And it's germane, it's baked into our military system, but it didn't always used to be that way. In fact, at the highest level of the Pentagon, we have a COO at the Joint Staff or at the Army Staff, 3-star general, day-to-day operations, hooking and jabbing, guerrilla cage fighting. That's what the COO is doing, right? He's at current ops, here and now, urgent, important, must happen, don't have enough time. Then we have a chief strategy officer who's also a 3-star. And he's about as busy, same staff, but he's focused on much different things. The strategy, the plans, how are we integrating? How are we getting deep? This is the guerrilla finishing school. Okay? The COO is the guerrilla cage fighter, and the CSO is the guerrilla finishing school. And what he does is he identifies upcoming guerrillas that are going to go into the cage, and he starts taming them so they're the known guerrillas, because then when the COO is in here, he's got known guerrillas and unknown guerrillas. And if we could have known that one early, we could have tamed them and made our life a lot easier. Okay, so we have it's a 1-2 thing. What I found as I've met with organizations, this is just to me, just an observation, is every organization has a COO. I've not seen one organization without a COO. But most organizations have what seems to me, I call it a CNO, a chief no officer. When it comes to strategy, there's nobody who's doing that. There's nobody who's doing, and this is super important stuff. If you're going to think in terms of 5, 10, 15 years, the legacy, the sustaining momentum and growing momentum of an organization, seems to me, right? So the Army, the military could not survive if we didn't have those two. It would be too crazy. It's too big. So here's one example of a planner, the right person solving the problem. I'm at Central Command headquarters. So the Army, the military has headquarters all around the world, right? They're all regional commands. Most of them are regional commands. Some span the entire world, like Special Operations Command or Strategic Command. But we generally have regional commands, Central Command, responsible for the Middle East. 20 countries in the Middle East, General Abizaid. This is 2004, 2005 timeframe. So General Abizaid is a 4-star commander, essentially has, from a U.S. military perspective, responsibility for the entire Middle East. That's from Afghanistan all the way to Israel. And his command basically represents everything our military does in that. Now, when I went there, we had ongoing operations in Iraq, 4-star headquarters, ongoing operations in Afghanistan, which became a 4-star headquarters. So this is a theater on fire, and it's still on fire to this day, as we know, we just read in the news. General Abizaid has a lot of plans, and I come into the headquarters 2004. I just graduated from this school, the Jedi Knights, right? This is my first real planning gig, and I'm going in there and I'm like learning about planning. We have all these plans we're responsible for. Certain, there's actually, I mean, if you think, there's like 30 different plans that a 4-star headquarters is responsible for in the Middle East alone. But actually there was no plan that integrates all of them. Like if you have things going on in Afghanistan, they're related to Iraq. These things are all related. They're interrelated, right? So how do you have to think about the integration of all this? And I'm thinking, we are not serving our commander if we do not have a plan that does this. It just seems crazy to me. Why would we have a lot of individual plans and not one integrating plan. So I'm making this pitch for this. And I talked to Major Mike Adderley in his cubicle, literally, just like Mike, and he's an Air Force planner. I'm an Army planner. He's a brilliant guy though. Saying, Mike, what if we had a plan that integrated everything from the theater, all 20 countries that are within the Middle East, all of the operations, all of the plans and all the activities? What if we could bring all that together? How would that enable our commander to understand the whole theater? He says, he looked at it, he says, sir, we got so much going on. I mean, this is a creative idea, right? I said, Mike, I think it's the horse to ride. Give it a think. He said, sir, okay, but I know we got a lot going on. Anyway, 3 weeks later, this is right before Christmas. 3 weeks later, Mike Adderley comes back to me after his Christmas break. He says, sir, I really thought about what you said, because we were all wrestling with this problem. And he says, I actually took time and created a theater campaign plan, a strategy that integrates all of our operations, plans, and activities for 10 years. He said, I had time during the Christmas break. It was slower, and I was able to put this thing together. I said, you're kidding me. Let's look at it. He shows it to me. Literally, he's like, brilliant. This is 4-star level stuff. This is CEO level, helping a senior leader see the big picture as it all fits together. I was amazed. He's showing me with his mouse on his, in those days we had mouses on our computers. He takes the mouse and he says, yeah, but sir, it'll never see the light of day. I said, Mike, send it to our boss. So I'm a lieutenant colonel, and the next rank is a colonel, right below a general. And I said, send it to the colonel. So he sends it to the colonel, and I'm right at the colonel's desk, and I said, sir, you've got to see this plan. Mike put it together. He has created something that really makes sense. Long story short, that plan gets approved at the 4-star level. Amazing. Not only approved at the 4-star level, the first time this has ever happened in our military, it goes to the Secretary of Defense. Secretary of Defense likes it so much, he says, this makes sense. It integrates our theaters. He, as the one who writes the plan and guidance for all commands around the world, his next planning guidance says every 4-star command on the planet will create a similar plan. Major Mike Adderley changed the planet. To this day, if you talk to any headquarters, they will know about what we call a theater campaign plan. And that all came from Major Mike Adderley, 3 meters cubed, the right guy in the right place, a planner solving a problem. So that's the power, I think, of the planner. Now, the plans are as simple as a GPS. I'm going to Brussels as a new 1-star. I had to brief the coalition headquarters there. I'm in Afghanistan. I just newly promoted to 1-star. I had to go talk to the coalition. I fly into Belgium. I get to the airport. I get my rental car, and they say, would you like a GPS? This is 2013. I really didn't even have a GPS. I knew what a GPS was generally, but I didn't, it was at the time when we were like, it was just not as prevalent. I think I got to pay this extra price for a GPS. He tells me how much. I thought, that's exorbitant. Can the government afford that? I'm thinking, and I got to get out of here, man. I don't want to figure out this GPS and how this thing's going to work and how it's going to hook. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to pay $100 a day for this thing, and I'm just going to be a rock in the back of my car, right? But I'm like, but the guy looks at me with this kind of look like, I know something you don't know. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. I get the GPS, I fire it up. It's actually pretty simple. Punch in my destination. It gives me a route. I'm on my way. Quarter mile out of that airport, I thought to myself, that is the best decision I have ever made. If I didn't get that GPS, I would be wandering through Flanders to this day. It is so, if you've ever been to Belgium, you understand that the roads are crazy. I got there on time though. Not only did I get to where I was supposed to go on time, but as I'm going, I happened to see this sign for Waterloo. I'm a military history guy. I'm thinking, Waterloo, like the Waterloo? Wow. Right-hand turn, take a break, and I get to see the battlefield of Waterloo. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. The real thing. It gave me an opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Right? It was amazing. If you've ever been there, it's a fascinating battlefield. And then I got to the headquarters on time. I said, these GPS things are pretty good, you know? And so that's kind of what a strategic plan is, I think. When I think about it, it's really very simple, right? It has three key elements to it. It has the destination, right? It has the way you get there. And then it usually tells you how much money it's going to take. You're going to walk, you're going to take a bus, you want to take a car, right? And you get to pick. That's kind of, strategic planning is so easy, a caveman can do it, right? So, and it really amounts to three things: the destination, the way you're going to go, and the resources. Now, in the military, we call that ends, ways, and means. And I'm amazed at how many plans that you read that they don't have all three of those things. They have to fit together. It will not stand if you don't have a clear correlation between ends, ways, means. A lot of major strategies at the highest level of government, I was reading them like, they have, okay, this is what we want to achieve. It says nothing about the resourcing of doing that, or it says nothing about how we're going to actually do it. Will we imagine building a building that would have a plan, but like just no way to get there? Like, when it doesn't explain the resources? I mean, that'd be crazy, right? We wouldn't do that. It's not going to be a success. So the three things of the planning. Now, here, I'll just give you a quick vignette on this. In Iraq, this is when I'm a new colonel. So I went from the Central Command, we did this major theater plan, and everyone's doing these plans. I go to Iraq, I'm a colonel. I'm halfway through my year-long tour in Baghdad. I'm flying to Baghdad. I just had 2 weeks break. I'm flying during the inauguration of President Obama. And we couldn't actually see it on the plane. They were trying to show it, but it kept cutting out. So I'm flying into Baghdad. I get into Baghdad. Now, at the time, I was what's called the chief of plans at the 4-star level. There's one 4-star level headquarters in all of Iraq. General Odier, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was the commander at the time. And I'm his chief of plans. So all the major planning that goes on for the theater, essentially my shop is responsible for. I fly in, I go to my office, I get word that there's a planning team ongoing. And you need to go now. I'm like, drop my stuff, go into the planning. What's going on? President Obama had literally, after his inauguration, calls General Odierno on the phone in Baghdad, commence planning for the drawdown of forces in Iraq. 300,000 service members and civilians are going to have to go down to 50,000. 500 bases all over Iraq and basing elements are going to have to go down to 30. 3.5 million pieces of equipment are going to have to be redeployed. And we're going to have to do this during active combat. A withdrawal under contact is the hardest thing to plan and execute for the U.S. military, historically. Normally, as a plans chief, I have a number of planners in my shop, right? And I give the planning responsibility to a good planner, and then they run the plan. This thing was going to be so massive. What ended up happening was I ended up becoming assigned as the chief of plans, the lead planner for this. And all of our planners for 6 months, with over 100 planners from throughout Iraq representing all the units, came to Baghdad, and we worked for 6 months to create a drawdown plan. They got approved to the Joint Staff and for the President's approval. Amazing effort that shows essentially we had to figure out where we where do we want to be? What's the ends? The ends is that the security that we have gained has to be the security that Iraq sustains. That's the idea. And the ways we're going to do this is we're going to focus on the basing, right? The troops and the equipment, and the resources is essentially the ability of the U.S. military to move all of this equipment and to be able to, for us to fill the space and sustain the security while we're moving away from it. We went into the planning, got the planning approved, and then 2 years later, this took 2 years to execute. Okay, so this is 2008 to 2009, get it approved. And by the end of 2011 is when we transferred authority to Iraq. Okay. At that time, I'm working for an officer by the name of General Mattis, 4-star commander of Central Command. I'm on his personal staff. And they have a small ceremony in Baghdad of the transfer of authority. About 30 different leaders. And I just happened to be there as a bag holder for General Mattis, right? Because he's representing all the key leaders of the US military there with the Iraqis. But it's a very small ceremony because they don't want to draw a lot of attention to this and all this kind of stuff, right? So I'm in the back there, and guess who shows up? Secretary Gates. And he talks about the operation. And he talks about the execution of this operation and how successful it's been. He said, this operation has been so successful, we have not lost one soldier as a result of this withdrawal in 2 years of execution. I thought to myself, wow, thank God. But it just should, but to me, I was like, and I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, I never would have heard that. But to me, I was like, that is the power of strategic planning. That's the significance, the importance, and the service that it can provide to people and to our nation. So I'm just riveted on it. I've just seen it over and over. So it's getting those three things together, the right planner with the right team, the ends, ways, means, and then the final thing is really the workout, what I call essentially gifts. Of course, it's my honor. Thank you very much. Of course. Thank you very much. So the third thing is really the process. Now, a lot of organizations can identify a planner and get a plan, or a planner with a team and can get a plan. But it just seems to me, from what I've heard, certainly in the military, even this is the case, if people, they create a plan, just put it on the shelf. In my view, that's not what it's about. You know, as I mentioned, I'm an integrator, I'm a strategic, my strength finder says, my top two strengths are strategic achiever. I love achieving, you know what I mean? I don't like to just create the strategy and like, okay, there it is. No, that's just the beginning. That's just getting the ball. Now we need to take it all the way down the field. That's what this is all about, right? And so I think it takes a workout. You know, it's interesting. 15 January, I think, is quitter day. It's amazing. It's part of our culture. It's like we start this great idea. Here's my New Year's resolution. But I've actually declared a day. I think we should declare January 14th never quit day. You know, that's what my mindset is. Like we're not quitting. You know, I mean, I hate going to the gym in January, and I love going to the gym in December. You know, because it's very open and you can get any machine you want, right? But what we want to do is we want to develop a sustained workout over time. So that's why I use a barbell for it, you know, hopefully as a memorable piece, but it's a really, so what is the workout comprised of? So I'm on the joint staff and I realized this diagram comes to my mind. I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense. So x-axis, I call it collaboration. Okay. Y-axis is levels of review. You put those two things together, watch out. Watch out. Something's going to happen. You collaborate and review at every level. That's a workout. That's the workout. And what happens on that 45-degree angle is a lot of things. One is you get collective consciousness. You're going to have an understanding so collectively within the organization. It is going to be too compelling. Everybody knows what they're doing. They know why they're doing it. And you don't need to tell them because they own it. The other is, I think, what I found, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you know, what his real responsibility is to provide advice. It's kind of amazing, doesn't it? Four-star general, this senior officer in the U.S. military, his job is to provide best military advice. He doesn't command, actually. I didn't realize that. He's not a commander. He's an advisor to the Secretary of Defense and the President. And I'm thinking to myself, how does he get, how do we help him get informed judgment for decision making? Because he's got to make decisions, he's going to make advice recommendations at a moment on any topic, anywhere on the planet, any command, any domain, land, sea, air, space, cyber, you name it, he has to speak to it. That is a big mandate. That's a tough job to have. And you got to know, you got to know your stuff. So I'm on the joint staff and I'm thinking, well, we go to brief General Dunford. I mean, it's 5 people at a round table. I looked on the other side of his office. He did have a 3-meter cube space, by the way. Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff has one too. But we were at his table and we're talking and we're briefing him on a major plan. Now, in our military, we have 5 major plans. They come under our strategy, right? It's Russia, major threats. You're all familiar with these, right? But Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and violent extremist organizations. Right? Those are the 5 big focal points. And for all of those threats, they're global threats. They're not just regional. Let's look at Russia. I mean, Russia is actually an existential threat to the United States. I mean, they're not just obviously in Europe, okay, or China, same thing. And you can see Iran. Iran isn't just in Iran. Iran is all over the Middle East. We know this in the news, right? So but they're not just there too. So they're global. And how are they global? They're global by ground, those domains, ground, air, sea, space, and cyber in various ways. So we're briefing General Dunford. One officer is briefing him on one of these plans. And he says to me, he says to our team, he says, why am I just being briefed by one person? This is a massive plan. And I had this idea that, we integrated the theater of Central Command. And I thought, why don't we globally integrate all of our military operations and plans and activities globally? What if we integrated all the theater plans? How would we do that? Well, it came down to focusing on those 5 threats. General Dunford, I said that to him. I said, sir, I think we should globally integrate so that you're hearing from all the leaders that are representing these plans. He looked at me and he didn't even say anything. I thought either I'm fired or like he thinks I'm nuts. 2 weeks later, he comes back to my boss, 3-star general, the chief strategy officer for the Joint Staff. He said, General Dunford just talked to me. We're going to work to globally integrate all of our operations plans and activities. And that's what we began doing. So let's look at one plan. We looked at Russia as an example. Let's just use that as an example. We create this plan, and how do we do it? We collaborate with planners all over the world from every command. Put them on we call it a video teleconference, but now we call it Zoom. Okay, so it's a global Zoom what we do, we collaborate. We said, there's a proverb that says, make war with many counselors and success is assured. So you get all the representatives of the teams, right? You get everybody who has a stake in this planning at the colonel level. We start working a plan. And what do? We take it to the 1 and 2 star level. And they review it. And they cut it to pieces. We say, thank you. And we take all that guidance, and we go back and we refine it. And they say, okay, it's good to go. We take it to the 3-star level. They go, I don't like this, I don't like that. We take all their guidance, we put it back in, we go back. They say, yes, bring it to the 4-star. Levels of review. You have, the president, CEO, the vice presidents, assistant vice presidents, and then the team below. Those are your levels of review. Here's the power of this, and I have seen this over and over and over. I mean, it's so compelling. 4 different theaters of war, 4 different situations I've seen this in that this has worked out. So we did this from all of these major plans. We collaborated with all the planners. We went through the colonel level, the 1-star level, 2-star level, 3-star level, 4-star level. This takes time. It's not the kind of thing, it's not crisis planning. You have to plan for the plan. We execute this, we go to brief the first one to General Dunford. This is going to be one of the big 5 major plans we're going to brief to him. In the tank, in the Pentagon. It's usually he just has 5 4-star generals in there that represent the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We suggest that he have all the commanders on the video teleconference. So we're briefing this plan, and we have 2 hours allocated to brief General Dunford on the plan. One of the officers next to me says, sir, we've got 93 stars in this room alone. And the room's not much bigger than this. I mean, it's like crammed with generals all from, and then on the video teleconference, every 4-star commander on the globe, they're all there. This is high pressure, high power. This is the plan of plans. We're going to execute. This is like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It doesn't get any higher, bigger, more significant than this. 2 hours allocated. 30 minutes later, 30 minutes into a 2-hour block, the plan was approved. Stunning. General Dunford said something you never hear the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said, I have so much time. He said, how much time do we have this briefing? 2 hours. He said, I have so much time. I want to hear from every 4-star personally what they think about this planning effort and this plan. So he hears from every 4-star. They all have an opportunity to speak on the plan. 15 minutes later, all approved. Every one of them said basically, very well collaborated, ready to execute. I approve. I have no issues. We're going around. I'm thinking, this is absolutely amazing. I thought, that is, so to me, the whole thing is that now I'm thinking, how amazing is that? Every 4-star in the planet. That means that General Dunford, who has to provide best military advice, could call a video teleconference at a moment, talk to every 4-star on the planet on a particular plan if he wanted to, get best military advice. What's the power of that advice that he to the Secretary of Defense right? He's gonna know what he knows, and he may not even know. He'll get information that he didn't know, perhaps, right? And because everyone's got their fingertips on this. So to me, what I see happening in this kind of dynamic, when you use levels of review, that's the highest level. That's the biggest example I know of, but there are many examples of that. What you see is that as you go through these levels of review and you include everybody that you can possibly include in your collaboration, I call it a collective consciousness. Eventually, it's like a workout. It's sets and reps. And you get more and more understanding of this. You keep reviewing the plan. Okay, what's the mission? What are the courses of action? What are we actually going to do? And it becomes really a part of the DNA of the organization, right? It's like, Russia, what? No, that's not it. It's like, this is what we're doing. And then you get commanders talking with commanders about different things that they're doing. Fast forward, A year later, I end up working for the COO for the Army, and I get hayed. He can't meet a meeting. He's got an integration meeting. I haven't been to an integration meeting. So, but I'm a 2-star and I do what the 3-star tells me to do. So I show up at the meeting. You know what the meeting was? It was the weekly meeting of the COOs integrating the global plans. I was like, touchdown. That is exactly what we want to have happen. A buddy of mine, a 2-star, he said, do you know that when we do this, it is going to change the way we position forces around the world? He seemed bristled. He was frustrated, like, because he briefs the SecDef every week on where forces are going to go. Those are big decisions, right? And he said this is going to require collaboration. If we put a major unit somewhere, multiple stakeholders are going to have to speak to it. And I don't know why, it just came to my mind. I said, because we were just about to brief his boss, the COO, on the strategy and how we're going to do this. And I said, we're doing it right now. We have forces all around the world. I said, do you want to do stuff or do you want to do stuff with a purpose? And he had no answer, right? Because there is no answer to that. Everyone wants to do stuff with a purpose. So that's what this is all about, is developing that collective consciousness. At the same time, I think what it does is it serves our leadership with very little time on their hands to inform their judgment for decision making. So Matt, like you're talking about, if I'm understanding, your work, you're in the midst of your strategic planning, and the integration of that planning has to be a great service to the leadership. It's the challenges where a lot of organizations seem, from my experience, from what I've learned, I have not seen, I can't speak for all, but here's where a lot of organizations really struggle, is getting that work out. It's not going to be clean. It's not going to be right, but maybe like it's a quarterly review. I've often heard of the planning just falling off the rails after you go through a huge strategic planning, all this time, all this money, all this effort, and it just falls like a dud. Nobody knows what it says. Nobody's executing it. Well, like, why do it then? But you can actually take that and then say, keep reviewing it and build that consciousness. So that's what I see is really the power of the strategic planning. And I'm really passionate about it. I found it to be very rare. I think you've got to be close to within this 5% of organizations if you're focused on strategic planning, because most organizations that I've been familiar with they don't even have it. They don't think in those terms. They think in terms of what burning platforms is what they say, right? And that's what you end up with, is burning platforms if you don't really think about the taming the gorillas early. So to wrap it up, 3 key things for successful strategic planning, at least from my experiences: a very good planner with a team, ideally representing the senior leadership of the organization to serve the whole organization and the leadership simultaneously, is really a mediator. A solid plan that integrates ends, ways, means, your destination, the way you're going to get there, and the resources to do it. And then a steady workout, no quitter days. There's no quitter days in the process of successful strategic planning. There's only through, and you're not going around it, you're not going over it, you're going through it. And eventually it becomes the collective consciousness and serves a senior leadership in the best way possible, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Ultimately, serve the entire organization by serving the leadership. So that's it. Subject to your questions. Thanks for your time. Sure, please. Any questions?
Feedback format, like how have you seen the most effective feedback delivered? Is it written? Is it verbal tone? Is it
Or
Excel spreadsheet with 100 items? Like,
I see.
how do you give that feedback at every level?
From my experience with it, a lot of times it can be just simply just taking notes and accounting for it, right? And I usually find that there's like a lot of times of planning, there's like a significant planning issue, and then there's sometimes like just maybe not as significant parts of it. You know what I mean? Some people have just format issues, even, things like this, and you just take it all. You just take it all. I mean, absorb it all, because it's only gonna. I told my fellow 1 and 2 stars around the globe, we were reviewing a major plan to go to the 3 stars, right? And everyone's like being very kind with each other. And I'm like, look, let's stop that. If you have something to say about this plan, tell us, and we will capture it. We'll write notes. We'll keep track of all of this, because I said, this is a dojo. We have to help each other, because when we go to the next level, we have to be able to speak as a team and represent, right? So then it's like this, you're building these fronts as you go forward. So it's really just capturing that and making sure, if it's legal, moral, and ethical, the right thing to do, then you do it. You fix it, because that's the power of collective buy-in, a multidisciplinary integration of the feedback. And it seems to me, oftentimes you get people that sometimes they might be reluctant to speak. So you kind of have to draw it out and say, okay, what do you see? What do you think? Because ultimately that's going to best serve leadership. Does that, and any questions? I mean, maybe something was confusing that I spoke to, or, anything you want to know, any way I can serve you guys. Okay, sure, yeah. Great question. And we try to use, you'd be amazed how antiquated strategic planning is, really. Really, we're trying to get tools and technology, and there's a lot of really potential things that can be developed to help us plan. But frankly, when I was working this in terms of putting PowerPoint slides together, there's growing technology, but I think DoD is lagging to that right now, to be fair. I think AI can also be a great resource, but when it really comes down to it, it does seem to me that it's art more than science, and it's going to take judgment on the part of a senior leader, right? Asking all the right questions. I wouldn't hesitate with AI, but at the same time, ultimately, we're talking about lives at the end of the day, right? So we can consider all the inputs, but it's our blood and treasure of our nation that's on the line. And so I think using all the resources that are at our disposal to the degree that we possibly can, and more. I would love to see some of the tools that we're trying to work in terms of helping us to map out strategic planning. There's a lot of really huge databases, but it's hard to put it into actually a living plan, if that makes sense. Great question. Any other questions? Anything about the military or strategic planning? Or it seems to me you do a lot of planning, and in your website, I don't think I've seen a website that refers to planning more. So I trust it resonates, but if you think there's something different, I'd be curious to know from your background, please. Great question also. You have to think it through in terms of ultimately, obviously in a military or any kind of organization, as a senior leader has to make the decision and own it. I think one of the challenges for us at times is to get to even the friction point, but welcoming the friction point and say, okay, here's how I see it. Here's how I see it. Okay, why, how do we resolve it? There's no fighting in the war room, right? But yes, you just got to work through to get to the right solution in the right space. Frankly, I welcome the discussion, because that's where you start really getting to a resolute answer. So then when you do go to that 3-star level, if we're at a 2-star level for it, it's going to be rock solid. Yeah. And obviously you have to do it as teammates. It's not the planner. The planner is creating the plan, but sometimes the planner, I don't know if you find this in the engineering and architecture world, but the planner almost identifies so much with the plan that they can't kind of like space themselves away from it. And the plan is just, this is something we're all creating, right? It isn't, there's almost like an identity correlation between these two. Sometimes we just have to get away from that and say, well, ultimately, we're going to serve best by the best plan. And that really has nothing to do with us as personalities. So there can also be, right, the tension of like people think, maybe they know more about something than someone else, or right. And then, so it takes a little bit of give and take and realizing, okay, what is the actual best thing at this time? Sometimes it's also, well, might be best now, might not be best in the future, or vice versa. Right. So thinking that through, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, but it's good to know that, right? Because we can anticipate and prepare versus react in despair. Okay, please.
Question about
Sure.
the review process, the process of working it out.
Yes.
Quarterly reviews could be good. But yeah, what's your recommendation?
Absolutely.
Corporate settings.
Right.
Quarterly, biannual, like what's the balance of?
So like working with a team, I'm developing a plan and then executing it. I like to say, what can the market bear? Like, what can the organization really handle? What can we do well in time? Right. So I find like maybe weekly might be too much, right? Unless it's a really crisis planning effort, we got to get after it, right? My sense, probably from a corporate perspective, just my intuition would probably be quarterly. Quarterly executive brief is probably an hour long. Now, if as you go through sets and reps and you're getting this collective consciousness, it becomes easier and easier to get, right? So it's not like you're doing the big workout in January and then you don't work out for 5 months and then you go back and it's really painful. No, it's like, what we atrophy in about 4 days, right? So you want to make sure your workouts are about every 4 days if you want to sustain your muscle. Same thing with an organization, maybe my sense is that it'd be probably quarterly would be a good way to, because every 6 months might be like, what were we talking about? What was that plan? Right. So you want it to be fresh enough that it's pertinent and that everyone can buy into it, but you don't want to be so frequent that people are like, oh my goodness, another one of those. I mean, so yeah, in working like with a nonprofit on this specifically, they found that was actually pretty powerful. And then you start seeing it over time. People get it more and more. They're getting stronger and stronger in this. It is super powerful. I just love watching that. So it takes time, right? It's not like this is not an instant thing. This is a sustained effort. Oh, man, is it powerful? It's so compelling. Yeah.
And what's the essential feedback that should be delivered at those quarterly check-ins? Like to say that's good, keep doing it.
Sure.
Okay, that's encouraging, but that's might not be enough.
Well, just I think like if I cut it right, Matt, you're figuring out, for instance, you come up with a plan, and your measures of the plan, right? The key performance indicators, like how do we know we're on track for what we want to do? Where we want to get to? Have we done the things that we're trying to do? So being able to measure, right? And it's almost like a snapshot. Where are we? Right. I mean, this is organizations, a Q1 brief, Q2 brief, right? In investing and, like what's our progress? How are we doing? And people know what those metrics are. So that's a good litmus test right there. And usually then obviously getting the senior leadership guidance, their input. Here's what's important to me. I want to know this, and this. And then that helps them. And it's probably going to be a little, if an organization hasn't done this in sets and reps, it's got to be, it's a learning process, right? So we're just learning together, but learning it, I just see it helping, I don't know what the friction points are, if there are within your team, but maybe the senior leadership is concerned about this, whether it's numbers of project, how is our revenue growing over time? Are we sustaining that? Are we growing that? Are we leveraging technology and AI? What are the deep things that we can be looking at? What are possible sectors that we can be looking at? Those kinds of things, right? So, yeah, so getting a sense of what they're interested in, what helps them best, I think is a good way to go. I just always feel like, so I'm working for a commander, and I'm a brand new COO at a very low level, right? and I'm brand new to this. I wasn't actually that up on operations, you know what I mean? It was newer to me because I was more in the planning. And I was kind of messing up as a COO. And my boss graciously pulls me aside and says, Chris, he said, why didn't you ask me for my guidance? You don't have to just go out and figure it out. So I pulled my pad out of my pocket. I said, sir, what is your guidance? And I was a sycophant, but I just was like, that's a great point. So then he just told me, because he's got it. He's a commander. He knows what he wants. And he says, I need this, 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 and this. I'm like, hey, I'm a strategic achiever. I'm a tactical achiever. I can do that. And then everything else is open game. So getting the leader, it's just like this dynamic between the leadership, what they're thinking, right? So planners are really, I think, these are leaders in their own right. And ideally, like an organization can identify someone to lead this group as a future leader in the organization. This is how you build the bench, the legacy. At the same time, it's just, yeah. I hope that answers the question. I mean,
So when we go to like from like a quarterly perspective, right? I feel like I said, I'm seeing I'm at the boots on the ground tip of the spear. How does like the military take like, you know, like that low end, back end feedback to get that to where it's coming to like your level? You're like, oh, this was successful, this wasn't successful, and so that you're informed when you go into that review process.
and we're usually we're taking, you know, when I identify a planner at the lowest level, I said, you're the planner, nobody else is the planner. And you're responsible for everybody in your chain of command. So you make sure they know what they need to know. You know what I mean? Like this isn't, we're not going to play, you know, rotating seats here. And so there becomes this ownership of this planner too, that they own it in a way that is so compelling. I say, like, when I'm putting someone in this seat, I say, I'm making rock stars. Because I have seen this happen. Mike Adderley's is just one story of many, many stories. You put the right person in the right place and you feed them well, you help them well, you get them what they need, you empower them. Incredible. Amazing. Amazing. They will become so compelling in that space. And that, you know, that it also, you know, in any sector that a planner has. I've seen it where I've had majors that work a plan and they're sitting next to the 4-star, briefing the 4-star. Really, you know, in very, these are some very compartmented briefings, but because that major has been leading the team of teams to get everybody's buy-in and understanding for briefing. So it's really giving ownership to that person, responsibility and ownership, from what I found. That's usually a dynamic with that. And another thing is trying to have two people, you know, like a primary and an alternate, so you never lose momentum or loss of functionality. Any other questions you guys have? It's a Friday afternoon. My goodness, come on. You know, Friday afternoon, strategic planning. Oh my goodness, delete. No, you know, I mean, no, it's really super important when you think about it, right? It'd be amazing. I really would, just seems amazing that only 5% of companies, you know, people either understand or are aware of their company strategy. Wow, what are we doing? I mean, so
Last question.
Sure, man.
All right, I had
no, please.
questions for you.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you.
At what point is a strategic plan too widespread and too all over the place? Like, is there a limit on goals?
The content of it or the,
Yeah, is there a balancing act?
I think that ends up it gets honed as you go through the review process a lot of times. So that's where you get to reality, right? I mean, if you get all those leaders together in one room, they're going to get it tight. Nobody wants to waste a second. Nobody wants to waste a resource. We're all about getting, you know, ultimately providing for our national security globally. And we have limited, relatively, I mean, we have a huge budget, right, for our military. But the reason we are such a global power, with such a preeminent military, is because we're thinking about all those things and thinking about the resourcing from a global perspective, right? I mean, you can't waste a penny of that resourcing. So it's really, you know, being a good steward of it, and really, I think as you get all those people working on it, the honing happens, right? There's just a power in the collective group, but then the other, it's like you have to get the right group, right? So you don't want any kind of fluff in what you're doing, but at the same time, you want to make sure you have all the stakeholders there. So you get all voices represented. So at the end of the day, when that briefing goes, it's like, it's a non-briefing in a sense, because everybody already knows what it's about. Did I answer all your questions, Jake? Sure. Military has, I mean, I know we have a lot of different things about planning, different, manuals and the schooling that I've been through. And there are a lot of really good products and articles on it, but I should probably, that's a neat question. I appreciate you asking that, because I haven't been asked for the resources, but I could give you certainly a number of them. Good books on the corporate side. Traction, for instance, the first one that comes to my mind, is really good in terms of how an organization collectively works together. But my upbringing was the military part of it, and we have an FM for operations and plans, right? We have field manuals for everything, but they have all these kind of key things. And my guess is, those who are involved in planning, you read that, you go, okay, actually, that makes a lot of sense. So I can send a list of those too, if you'd like to just kind of peruse through and see what the military. It seems there's probably a symbiotic relationship from the corporate. My sense is that the corporate world, this is just my intuitive sense so far, is that there is not a correlation of the development of strategic planners in the corporate world the way there has been in the military. And I think there's a whole body of people in the military that are riveted on this and skilled in it that could be of amazing service to corporations to help them understand it. That's what my guess is. And it's not that there isn't an interest. It's maybe, some officer, General Huba Vastasega is his name. I worked for him as a captain. He's the one who came up with the idea of having a school for strategic planners for the military. Started with 12 guys, and now they graduate 80 a year. They are all over the world. It's amazing. And it's so ingrained in our culture now, right? And I could see that happening in the corporate world. And I think it could be a great service where you have COOs and CSOs. So that, it's kind of close fight, deep fight, but they both fit together as a two-piston machine. Okay. Is that good, Matt?
I think that's great. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Chris.
My honor. An honor to be here. Everyone stayed awake?
Yeah.
Friday afternoon? That's awesome. I hope it was of service to you. Of course.